Hi, and welcome back to the module on technology-led disruptions. In the previous session, we discussed why disruptive innovations are largely technology-led in today's business environment. We gained insights into some of the technologies and technological innovations that are leading to disruptive products and business models. In this session, we will see these disruptive forces play out in the context of the music industry. We will examine constraints that operate on incumbents in the industry, and we will talk about this in the context of the music industry in the West. But given that the case of Sony is set in India, I will use that context as well in our discussion. Let's start with examining the value chain in the music industry as it was before technology disruptions hit it. Specifically, I want to focus on the state of three key stakeholders in the value chain: the artists, the recording company, and the consumers. Let's start with the artists. Composers, lyricists, performing artists provided the raw artistic input for the business. How were they compensated for their work? Remember, in the Indian music industry, the film music genre dominated relative to the indie genre. In the case of the film genre, the artists were paid a fixed compensation per song and did not own the music. In the case of the indie music, they were paid a royalty against the sales of their work. This was the tradition in the West as well. Do you imagine the artists were a happy and satisfied group back then? If you're shaking your head in disagreement, you're right. Consider the efforts of the legendary artist Prince to escape his contract with Warner Music. The late artist changed his name to an unpronounceable symbol. He claimed that his old contract did not apply to the artist formerly known as Prince. During subsequent disputes, he appeared in public with the word slave inscribed on his cheek to reflect his relationship with Warner Music. Warner released him from his contract in 1995. The artist's next albums were distributed by his own label and promoted primarily via the internet. Though sales volumes were low, the artist claimed that his net proceeds were higher than they had been with Warner before. In 1999, he returned to a major record company, signing with BMG. Why this vehement dissatisfaction? In the case of the film genre, the artist's dissatisfaction stemmed from not owning their creative inputs. In the case of indie artists like Prince, it stemmed from the tight control that recording companies wielded over them. Having prominent artists like Prince under contract not only brought greater sales directly, but also helped the recording company gain precious retail shelf space for lesser-known acts of new artists that they were trying to break into the industry. Promising new artists tend to be attracted to recording companies which have the best artists under contract and show a strong history of successful management. Sometimes the demands of premier artists can undermine the profitability of a record company for that specific act. Consequently, product managers have to balance the benefits of an artist's big name with the costs of holding the artist under contract. Read slave. But what were the recording companies doing for the artist that enabled them to wield so much power and control? In order to answer this, let's look at all the activities performed by the recording company. Each recording company took performing artists under contract. It purchased musical rights from publishing houses, managed the recording process, manufactured CDs and cassettes, distributed CDs and cassettes to retailers and other channels, and promoted products aggressively. During this process, the company paid for all costs associated with launching new music. Also note that a bulk of these value chain activities required large upfront investments in acquiring and promoting music. There was also significant fixed costs of production facilities, etc., that the recording companies incurred. Only large companies could amortize these costs over several products. This was a capital-intensive business and a business of giants. Further, the nature of the business model was that profits are concentrated in a small number of large hits which are very, very difficult to anticipate. So you're making these upfront investments without knowing or realizing what the expected return on these investments are going to be. The case tells you that 4 out of 5 recordings lose money. And the biggest hits sell orders of magnitudes, more copies than do flops. Large companies are able to pool the risk associated with each individual album release and hence are able to survive the inevitable flops. Promotional channels also leverage this portfolio. So if I had many hits, I would tell the radio channels, I'll give you this super hit track, give me a discount on airtime for this new artist that I'm trying to launch. In other words, the business model of recording companies was all about creating a very large portfolio of music tracks that allowed you to diversify the risk of failure associated with the individual tracks. And for these reasons, as I noted earlier, the recording business was a game of giants. Consolidation had reduced the number of labels to 4 majors: Universal Music Group, Sony, Warner, and EMI, all giants. So if you were a new indie artist, where would you go? To the giant that would help you break into this industry. If you were an established artist, where would you go? To the giant that helped you produce and distribute your music. And that's why the recording company wielded the power that they did over the artists. Did they wield power over you too, the consumer? To answer that, consider how you consumed music in the pre-internet world. Typically CDs. How many songs in a CD? 10, maybe 12. How many did you like? 1, maybe 2, maybe 3. Yet you were restricted in your purchase, where you had to buy the entire album. And innovations in consumption in this industry, who drove them? How did the cassette evolve to the CD and so on? The recording companies drove these innovations. So it was safe to say that the recording company was the most powerful entity in the value chain, with the customers and artists a relatively dissatisfied, disempowered lot at best. Annual sales in this industry were an all-time high of $14.5 billion in the US in 1999. But the first tremors of disruption were felt that very year. By 2008, sales would be down to less than half of the year's levels. Technology would have disrupted this industry in an unprecedented manner. Let's see how.